Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome back to my channel and to this new segment that I decided to call New Ian Agora. This is where I'm going to discuss everything, everything that comes on my mind, really. And I'm always going to try and give it a slant, a spiritual slant, a thelemic slant. It seems that everybody really enjoyed the video that I put out a few days ago. And so I'm gonna keep the same style. So this too is gonna be unscripted, just my thoughts. Um, I have some notes in front of me just because I want to be sure that I touch the points that I want to touch. But again, there's no script. It's just as raw and unfiltered as it comes. Like I said, it seems that everybody has been really enjoying that first video, and to me, it's kind of interesting because I always try to have this sort of engagement through live streams, but apparently live streams just don't get the same traction here on YouTube that do on other platforms. So I'll try more of these videos, and then in time maybe we'll go back to do live streams as well on this platform. Of course, if you watched my previous video, you will have noticed that the problem I'm seeing right now in the world and in our tiny corner of the world, which let's call it occulture, even if it's a terrible term and maybe we should find something better. The occult community, is there even a community? We're all so divided, and we all have our different interests, and even inside Thelema, we're splintered, and everybody has their own idea of what Thelema is and what it's meant to be. But let's call it occult community, everybody who's listened and is interested in this topic here on YouTube. And I think that the problem remains this entryism of Christian fundamentalism. Again, I'm not going to repeat what I just told in the previous video. You can go and watch it if you want. The reason why I'm here today is because it's almost like in a classic case of synchronicity. The very day that I posted the video, there was a book that was released. A book by this guy called Lucas Miles, and the title of the book is Pagan Threat. This book was released on Humanics Books, which is a Newsmax division. And if you know what Newsmax is, it's a news conglomerate in the United States, which is very, very, very right-wing, very conservative. I wouldn't call it like far-right, but definitely seriously right-leaning. It's also interesting because it's one of those conglomerates that have been given a lot of attention in the last few years to the UFO, UAP disclosure movement. And I think that's interesting to notice because in many ways, the UFO, UAP disclosure movement on itself was a sort of, Trojan horse to start to seed certain reactionary ideas in fringe communities, in the occult community, in the paranormal community. And that's the problem, right? Because as I told you before, those people are the one who wants us all gone. When push comes to shove, those people do not care if you are, a pagan or a Christian esotericist or an hermetist or a Platonist or all these words that make sense to us that we understand as categories. But the threat that I am identifying of Christian fundamentalism doesn't care. We're all the enemy for them. And again, so I really think that there is this constant entryism, and more people are falling for it. And I'm gonna explain why, at least why I think it's happening, and what can we do to course correct, if that's even possible at the moment. So that book, Pagan Threat, this book was written by this guy called Lucas Miles, which is a very prominent figure in the evangelical community. I would say in the far right ultra-reactionary evangelical community. And lo and behold, this book also had a foreword by the recently passed and assassinated Charlie Kirk. I would like to spend very few words on Kirk himself, which I didn't do to the extent that I should have done in the previous video. Charlie Kirk was not a moderate. Charlie Kirk was an extremist. He exposed odious ideas on race, on gender, on religion, and it's absolutely disgusting the way he is being lionized and whitewashed for the past week or so. Not only by the Trump regime in the United States, which is a fascist regime true and true by now. I mean, you cannot deny the truth in front of you. Of course, you can fool yourself, but then again, I would urge you all that are fooling yourself to go back and read 1984 by George Orwell, and you will understand exactly what is happening to you. But not only has been Charlie Kirk has been lionized and pretty much like given a sort of saint status already by the regime in the United States, but by also a lot of people that frankly should know better. Or maybe we're just, expecting too much of them because we came to this strange society where people with a megaphone and with a platform and with a spotlight are considered more intelligent or more worthy of attention. And again, I am perfectly fine with being one of them. I think I try to make sense and I try to present you with as factual evidence as possible. But again, I might be mistaken here and there myself as well. Anyway, Lucas Miles, Pagan Threat, and the book is absolutely insane. In the table of content, you find chapter titles such as "A New Pagan Generation," "Lilith and Lucifer," "Transgenderism and the Occult," "A Global Theosophy," "A Techno-Pagan World." I mean, I only skimmed through it because it was the epitome of fanatical slop. Okay, I don't know if some of you are stronger than me and maybe have more time to waste. Maybe you can read it and let me know in the comments how bad it really is. Trust me, you're not going to change my mind. That's better. If that's your aim, by all means, feed the algorithm with your comments. But you're not going to change my mind. And just to give you an idea, like there's some things, there's some takeaways in this book, like for instance, like the woke ideology is the same as ancient paganism, and the reality is that terms like identity politics and intersectionality are political legal frameworks and not religious liturgies. Or again, the transgender identity is occult driven. And I mean, this was something was going on for a while, on the schizo TikTok or 4chan or Reddit, all those cesspits of the internet, whereby people were saying that, of course, Baphomet is a transgender deity, and so whoever identifies as trans, whoever is trans, must be, a devil worshiper. And if you have the time, I did a live stream on this like a year ago on Baphomet, explaining what Baphomet really is, how it really, I mean, the image of Baphomet we have really comes from Eliphas Levi. So we're talking 18th century. And it was really like almost like a socialist icon, believe it or not. It's nothing to do with transgenderism per se, if not that it is a representation of the union of the opposites. Again, this is something that certain occultists should know very well, but they seem to be ignoring it because it seems to me that they're lost in this craze against the woke, quote unquote. And like I said in my previous video, I wonder if there are some sinister forces or sinister interest at play. I wonder if some of these people are paid to say certain things. Um, I do believe strongly that we've been deep inside some sort of mind war for the last decade or so, and maybe historians will look back at this period and think of this as World War III, just waged on a asymmetrical battlefield. Of course, there are some very hot battlefields right now. Thinking of Gaza, I'm thinking of Ukraine, but then again, there's been cold battlefields or virtual battlefields on the internet for a long time. I'm not going to pretend to know who is waging war with. I have my ideas, but like I said, trying to be as factual as possible. But I would say that it would be foolish not to see this war being waged. And again, when wars are waged, there are soldiers and there are spies. There are diplomats and there are propagandists, and oftentimes the latter are paid actors, right? And so it was very interesting that, like, the Christian fundamentalist sect or faction, which is one and the same with the Trump regime, and I would say with all the regimes that have been embracing neo-reactionary thought and ultra authoritarianism, it's really interesting that they now been pushing very very clearly this new threat, which is not so much gender identity anymore, but religious identity. And I think that everybody who did not see this coming was either deluded or complicit, or they were looking for this moment to happen. One of the theories that have been circulating around the motives of Charlie Kirk's killer was that he was connected with this black-pilled schizo online group called the Groypers, which are the fans of Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist neo-Nazi. And again, he called himself, like, I'm not making things up, I'm not slandering anyone. He is a self-proclaimed white supremacist, misogynist, chauvinist, neo-Nazi. So just to be clear here, right? While I think it hasn't been proven any real connection with the Groypers, and I think that the truth of the matter is that the killer has a lot more complex motivation. And if you're curious, I would suggest you to start looking at what the black pilled means, being black pilled, what that means. Because if you have not been paying any attention to how radicalized youngsters, under 30, I mean, men and women under 30 have been in the last 10 years, you're in for a terrible roller coaster. But I feel like you must know. I feel like you should get to understand what's really happening out there. I feel that when the truth will be served, if there will be, because you cannot say, with the kind of fascist regime in the United States right now, it's really hard to hope for truth to come out from any investigation. But if there will be truth, I think that the motives will be very much more complex than left or right or anything very black and white. However, back to the Groypers, I mean, these people have been advocating for the return of the burning times, pyres of heretics. And again, I want to make it clear, the heretics, I'm a heretic, you are an heretic, your friend who's a Rosicrucian is a heretic, your other friend who's a queer witch is an heretic, all heretics, unless they are white and Christian. And when it comes to Christian, I want to address this as well, because someone on Facebook made the point that I should not condemn Christianity as a whole. And in fact, I don't. But I also think that many of you who do not come from a Catholic background like I do, so all of you come from Protestant countries. So I don't know, the UK, the United States, mostly, right? Germany, as who were born and bred Catholics, Italians, but only Irish and Spanish and Portuguese, etc. We know what it's like to deal with a religion that sees itself as the rightful religion of the country you're born in. It doesn't matter if your country presents itself as a lay country. There's no state religion in Italy, for instance, but the vast majority of Italians are culturally Catholic, and that implies that for the longest time, and things haven't changed yet, really, but for the longest time, if you were not a devout Catholic, you would be ostracized by your community. That's what these people want. They want to go back to the same thing. They want to walk back on all the hard-earned rights that we collectively, as a society, fought and won over the last maybe 100 years. That's insane to me, okay? Because once again, the problem here is presented as an us versus them. And I see this in occult commentary as well. And I think, again, it's very dangerous. It's either disingenuous, and that I mean the person saying this is stupid, or they had so many overwhelming negative spiritual experience, which means that their initiation was not up to scratch for what they were trying to experience, or they're paid actors. I will not name names. This is not a response video like the previous one. But I would argue that for all of these talking heads that keep pushing the us versus them, the angelic versus demonic narrative, you are either deluded, or maybe you should come clean and tell us who is paying you for spreading this kind of panic. Because it's a panic, right? This is the return of the Satanic Panic. It's right here, right now. And it's enacted not only by those crazy evangelicals that Pence book like Pagan Threat, but also in our own community. Those very magicians and esotericists that keep insisting that there is a war in heaven. And you will remember that I mentioned that one of the Trojan horses that I've seen of this narrative was, in fact, the UFO UAP disclosure community. Because again, over there, it's really easy to start talking about bad UFOs or invasion from the skies, especially because usually the experiencers in those communities have no initiation to speak of. And so they are literally men and women who are tossed in the middle of a very overwhelming experience without any sort of protection, without any sort of hazmat suit, if you want. And that's what all the magical rituals that we do, all the energetic-based magical rituals that we do, like the banishings or the middle pillars exercises and etc., the pranayama, etc., that's what they are there for, to prepare you for the experience. If you've never done anything like this, and one day you see a UFO, you might experience what Michael Bertillot defines as the bad UFO experience, which is, the abductions, the violence, and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that there is a war in heaven. It just means that the experiencer was unprepared for what was happening. Or if somebody thinks they're suffering from demonic attack, it's because possibly they've been poking things they were not ready to poke, and they're now pretty much experiencing, the heat that comes whenever you stoke a furnace, and then you were not even supposed to be in front of a furnace. But I digress. I think that, and then I'm gonna wrap this up, so I'm not gonna bother you for too long. I think that the big elephant in the room here is that this constant focus on the us versus them narrative has at its core one problem that I don't see many discussing. And the problem, believe it or not, has nothing to do with spirituality. The problem is economic in nature. We are all way poorer than we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And we are poorer because our governments insist to bail off banks back in 2008, or to give money to corporations and the ultra rich instead of investing in us, the taxpayers. And you would ask, Marco, what are you talking about? What does this have to mean with everything you discussed so far? The moment you don't have money to make your mortgage payments, to feed your children, to go on holiday the way I used to do, you get angry. And in order to keep you angry and not demand from your governments the kind of social security you had up until a few years ago, well, out of sudden, those bad actors need you to be angry, not at them, but at the different. And so it's the immigrants, and so it's the trans people, and now we're starting to go back to it's the pagans, the ones that have a different religion from me. Trust me, this always was the end game, because authoritarian governments are close tied with Christian fundamentalism. It's the same thing, and they do not want a thriving middle class or upper class. They want serfs and leaders, or I don't know, maybe they style themselves as kings, right? I strongly suggest you to go online here on YouTube and watch the videos by this economist here in the UK called Gary Stevenson that explain this problem way better than I can. But do yourself a favor, especially if you're a spiritual person, as I guess you are if you're listening to me here on my channel. Because trust me, the problem of all our higher spheres are here in Malkuth. And the problem here in Malkuth is one of economic dominance and economic and financial inequality. We always had immigrants. There were always trans people. You didn't see them because you were rich. You could go on holiday. You were not bothered by these little problems, because they are little problems. Because diversity, cultural diversity, enriches us. But out of sudden, someone has decided that you must be angry at them. And I insist for the final time that they're also invading our spiritual places to massage the narrative a little bit, so that we have to be worried about the demonic influencing our viewpoints. All of us who were perfectly fine in a diverse, progressive society up until a few years ago, where we all had our hard-earned money and financial security to live our lives the way we must live. This is it for me now. Like I said, unscripted, raw, unfiltered. Let me know what you think about in the comments below. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, join Patreon. You know all the things. Like, I have all these things, but this new Eon Agora series is more about sharing these ideas with you. For the time being, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love and the will.